Jasmine Taylor was an executive assistant at the lower rung of Harrington Global, known for her sharp mind but often overlooked by the corporate elite. A striking black woman, Jasmine carried herself with a quiet grace and strength. Her skin, a deep, rich mahogany, glowed under the office lights, and her dark, almond-shaped eyes reflected intelligence and resolve. Her natural curls were pinned elegantly into a bun, revealing a smooth neckline and high cheekbones that seemed carved by an artist's hand. But beyond her beauty, there was a power in her presence, the kind that commanded attention without demanding it. Miles Harrington, the formidable CEO of Harrington Global, sat in his corner office, the glass walls revealing the skyline as dusk painted the city in amber hues. He looked out over his empire, but tonight, all he could see was trouble. Scandals had rocked the corporation. Insider leaks, financial missteps, and now the board was breathing down his neck. His reputation was hanging by a thread. Tonight's private investor dinner was his last hope to convince stakeholders the ship could still be righted. The only problem? His strategic partner and trusted confidant, Claudia Monroe, had just called to say she was out. A family emergency, she said, though Miles doubted the timing. Now, with just hours to spare, he had no one to stand by him in front of the investors. He needed someone sharp enough to engage, charming enough to win trust, and graceful enough to deflect unwanted questions. As he scrolled through his contacts in frustration, his eyes landed on a name he'd never have thought of before: Jasmine Taylor. She had always handled herself professionally at the office front desk. He remembered how she would catch things others missed, how she listened carefully, gave precise answers, and had an uncanny ability to read the room. Maybe, just maybe, she could pull it off. Taking a gamble, he pressed the intercom. A few minutes later, Jasmine walked in, holding her notepad. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Harrington?" she asked, her voice calm but curious, her gaze sharp as ever. Miles studied her for a moment before speaking. "I need a favor. A big one. My companion for tonight's investor dinner bailed, and I need someone to step in, someone who can handle pressure and hold intelligent conversation. I think you can do that." Jasmine's brows lifted slightly, surprised. "You want me to go with you to a dinner full of investors and executives?" "Yes," Miles said simply. "I don't have many options, and I trust you'll represent the company well. I won't lie, this is high stakes. You'll need to look the part and act the part, but I think you're capable of more than this job ever let you show." Jasmine hesitated, her heart pounding. This could be the opportunity of a lifetime, but it could also end her career if she failed. Still, something inside her refused to shrink from the challenge. Taking a slow breath, she nodded. "All right, I'll do it." Miles gave a small, approving smile. "Good. You have 3 hours to get ready. The driver will pick you up." At exactly 7:55 p.m., a sleek black limousine pulled up in front of Jasmine's apartment. She stepped out in an elegant emerald green gown that hugged her curves with delicate silver jewelry catching the light. Her makeup was subtle yet powerful, highlighting her strong cheekbones and full lips. As she stepped into the limo, Miles looked her over with a hint of surprise and something close to admiration. "You look incredible," he said, slightly stunned. Jasmine smiled faintly, her nerves buried deep beneath layers of confidence. "Thank you. I figured it wouldn't do to show up underdressed." When they arrived at the upscale venue, filled with men in tailored suits and women in designer dresses, Jasmine held her head high. As they entered the grand hall, conversation quieted for a brief moment as heads turned to look at the stunning woman on Miles Harrington's arm. The evening began tensely, but soon enough, Jasmine proved her worth. When one of the board members asked a sharp question about Harrington Global's integrity, Jasmine smoothly interjected with an insightful comment about the company's community initiatives, something she had quietly organized but had never been acknowledged for. Her voice was steady, her tone warm but intelligent. Investors started to take notice. At one point, an influential investor, Mr. Whitmore, leaned in and asked Miles, "Where have you been hiding this brilliant young woman?" She knows her stuff, Miles chuckled, glancing at Jasmine. I guess I underestimated my own team. Later in the evening, as the crowd thinned and Miles and Jasmine stood near the balcony overlooking the city, he turned to her. You were remarkable tonight. You turned some serious heads and minds. Jasmine smiled, feeling the power of having finally been seen. Thank you. I'm glad I could help. Miles studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his gaze. I think it's time you stop sitting behind that desk. There's a lot more you could be doing here, Jasmine, if you want it. Her eyes sparkled, confidence growing. I do. From that night on, everything changed. Miles began giving Jasmine more responsibility, including her in key meetings and decisions. Her voice, once unheard, became one of the sharpest in the room. What started as a desperate decision turned out to be the best move Miles ever made. And Jasmine? She had finally stepped into the spotlight she was born to own. But not everyone was thrilled about Jasmine's sudden rise. Vanessa Caldwell, Miles's ex-girlfriend and head of public relations at Harrington Global, had been watching closely. A stunning woman with sharp features and an even sharper tongue, Vanessa had always enjoyed her exclusive access to Miles, both professionally and personally. When she saw Jasmine effortlessly gliding through meetings and earning Miles's trust, jealousy bloomed like a thorn in her chest. To Vanessa, Jasmine was nothing more than a receptionist who didn't belong in the upper echelons of power, and certainly not beside Miles. At the next company luncheon, Vanessa leaned into a small group of executives, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Funny how quickly some people rise when they catch the right man's eye, isn't it? She murmured, glancing meaningfully at Jasmine and Miles seated together across the room. The rumor spread like wildfire. Whispers that Jasmine and Miles were far more than professional, that her promotion wasn't earned but slept for. Jasmine heard the murmurs in the hallways. Though she kept her head high, a quiet storm brewed inside her. She knew she'd have to prove herself twice over now, not just to lead but to silence the rumors threatening to undermine her. The next morning, the office buzzed with low whispers as Jasmine walked in. She could feel the stares following her, judging, assuming. Emails slowed when she passed, and hushed conversations died abruptly when she entered a room. But Jasmine refused to let them see her sweat. She walked with her head high, her heels clicking confidently against the marble floors. By midday, she decided enough was enough. Instead of hiding from the rumors, she walked straight into the executive conference room where a few key department heads had gathered. I just want to address something since it seems to be the hot topic, Jasmine began, her voice calm but firm. The room stilled. There's been a lot of gossip about how I've gotten where I am. Let me be clear. I'm here because I earned it. I worked harder than anyone gives me credit for, and if anyone has doubts about my skills or professionalism, I'll be happy to prove myself in any room, any day. But if you think I'm going to shrink or step back because people are uncomfortable with seeing a black woman in this position, think again. The silence was thick, but there was also a spark of respect in a few pairs of eyes. Meanwhile, Miles was in his office reviewing reports when his VP, Mark, hesitantly knocked and stepped in. Hey, Miles, just a heads up, people are talking about you and Jasmine, Mark said carefully. Vanessa's been stirring things up. Miles' jaw tightened, the vein in his temple pulsing. What kind of talk? That she's where she is because of you, and not her talent. Miles stood abruptly, pushing back from his desk. Unbelievable, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. His eyes darkened with anger. Without a word, he left his office, heading straight for Vanessa's. Knocking once, he stepped inside without waiting for permission. Close the door, he said sharply, and Vanessa, caught off guard, obeyed. If I hear one more word of that nonsense you're spreading about Jasmine, I will personally see to it that you're out of this company so fast you won't have time to pack a box. Do I make myself clear? Vanessa's eyes widened, but she recovered quickly, feigning innocence. I don't know what you mean, Miles. People are talking. No, you started them, Miles snapped. You think I don't know? Let me also make something else clear. Jasmine got where she is because she's sharp, capable, and exactly what this company needs right now. You're jealous because you've been sitting comfortable and she's rising on merit. If you can't work with her, maybe you don't belong here anymore. With that, he turned and walked out, leaving Vanessa pale and seething. Later that evening, Miles called Jasmine into his office. I heard what you've been dealing with, he said, his tone softer now, filled with regret. I'm sorry I didn't step in sooner. Jasmine smiled faintly. I can fight my own battles, but thanks. He looked at her for a long moment, admiration in his eyes. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here, Jasmine. Don't let anyone make you think you don't deserve it. She met his gaze, standing tall. Don't worry, I won't. And with that, Jasmine walked out of his office, stronger than ever, a woman who wouldn't be silenced no matter how many tried. A week later, Harrington Global hosted a charity gala, a glamorous event filled with clients, investors, and top executives. Jasmine arrived in a sleek burgundy gown that complemented her smooth complexion, determined to focus on work and avoid the whispers still lingering in the halls. As she made her way to the refreshment table, a tall man with a charming smile and confident air approached her. Quite the event, isn't it? He said smoothly, handing her a glass of champagne. Jasmine glanced up, surprised by the stranger's easy manner. It is, she replied, accepting the glass. And you are? Darren Caldwell, he said, extending a hand. Consultant. I've worked with Harrington on and off for a few years. The name Caldwell tugged at Jasmine's memory, but she couldn't place it. Still, Darren was charismatic, with sharp gray eyes and a smile that could disarm anyone. To her surprise, Darren spent most of the night by her side, engaging her in clever conversation. He asked about her career, her ambitions, and listened intently, laughing at her jokes, even complimenting her strength for handling things with grace. By the end of the evening, as people began to leave, Darren leaned in slightly, his voice low and smooth. I've really enjoyed talking with you, Jasmine. You're not what I expected. Would you like to have dinner sometime? Just us. No work. Jasmine hesitated, charmed but wary. She agreed to think about it. What she didn't know was that Darren was Vanessa's cousin, planted to get close to her, dig up dirt, and report back anything that could be used to take her down. For Darren, this wasn't just a date. It was a trap. A few days later, Jasmine agreed to meet Darren for dinner at a sophisticated, low-lit restaurant downtown. She arrived dressed elegantly in a fitted black dress and subtle jewelry, keeping her demeanor professional but open. Darren was already waiting at the table when she arrived, standing to greet her with that same disarming smile. You look stunning, Jasmine, he said smoothly, pulling out her chair. Thank you, Darren, she replied with a polite smile, sitting gracefully. As the waiter took their orders, Darren leaned in, focusing on her with sharp intensity. So, he began, swirling his glass of wine, I have to say, I'm really impressed with how you've been handling things at Harrington. Not everyone could deal with that kind of pressure and still manage to rise. Jasmine smiled carefully. Thank you. It hasn't been easy, but I focus on the work. Darren chuckled. I'm sure. And Miles Harrington, he seems to value you a lot. Some say maybe more than just professionally. Jasmine's smile thinned slightly. Miles respects hard work, that's all. Darren raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. Of course. I was just curious. You know how people talk. Something about the way he said it made Jasmine's guard go up. She took a sip of her drink, studying him quietly. And what do you think, Darren? Since you seem to know what people say. He gave a charming grin, but there was a flicker of something calculating in his eyes. I think you're a smart woman, ambitious. And smart women know how to use their opportunities. Jasmine's expression cooled slightly. I earn my opportunities, always have. There was a pause. Darren leaned back, watching her carefully as though measuring her response. So what are you hoping for next, Jasmine? A bigger role? Maybe something even closer to the top? He asked casually, but his words were too pointed to be innocent. Jasmine's mind raced. Why was he so interested in her career moves? Why was he so focused on Miles? She kept her voice calm but sharp. I'm focused on doing my job well. Nothing more, nothing less. And honestly, Darren, these sound like questions someone from HR should be asking, not a casual dinner date. Darren chuckled, trying to play it off. Just making conversation, Jasmine. You're an intriguing woman. Hard to read. Maybe that's intentional, she said smoothly, meeting his gaze without flinching. By the time dessert was served, Jasmine knew something wasn't right. Darren was charming, but too curious, asking about Miles, her role, even Vanessa in roundabout ways. As they left the restaurant, Darren walked her to her car, leaning close. I had a great time tonight, he murmured. Hope we can do this again soon. Jasmine smiled politely, but her eyes were cold now. We'll see, Darren. Good night. Sliding into her car, she watched him in the rearview mirror as he stood there, watching her drive away, his smile slipping into something darker. Jasmine gripped the steering wheel tighter. Something told her this wasn't the last of Darren Caldwell. But next time, she'd be ready. The next morning, Jasmine sat at her desk, sharp eyes scanning her screen as she dug deep into Darren Caldwell's background. It didn't take long for her suspicions to be confirmed. Vanessa's cousin, indeed. A man with a reputation for getting information and playing both sides. She wasted no time marching straight into Miles's office, closing the door firmly behind her. We need to talk, she said, her tone serious. Miles looked up from his desk, concern already on his face. What's wrong? Jasmine sat down, hands folded. Darren Caldwell. I went on that dinner you know about, and now I know why he was so curious. He's Vanessa's cousin. Miles' expression darkened instantly. What? Yeah, Jasmine nodded. And he spent the whole night fishing for dirt. About you. About me. Miles stood abruptly, his jaw tight. I'm going to deal with Vanessa. She's gone too far. But Jasmine shook her head, a small, calculating smile playing at her lips. No, let me handle this. I have a plan. Trust me. Reluctantly, Miles sat back down. What are you thinking? Jasmine's eyes gleamed. We let her walk into her own trap. Later that afternoon, Jasmine's phone rang, Darren's name flashing across the screen. She let it ring twice before answering, keeping her tone casual. Jasmine, Darren said smoothly, I was hoping we could have dinner again. There are things I'd like to discuss. Maybe pick up where we left off? Jasmine smiled to herself, already anticipating his move. Dinner sounds great, Darren. Actually, there's something I need to tell you too. It's time you heard it from me. Darren practically beamed through the phone. Perfect. Tomorrow night? Tomorrow? She confirmed, voice sweet as honey. The next evening, they met at an upscale restaurant. Darren was charming as ever, leaning in, offering smiles, clearly expecting Jasmine to drop a confession he could run straight back to Vanessa. As their entrees arrived, Jasmine leaned in close, lowering her voice just enough to draw him in. Look, Darren, I wasn't going to say anything, but I know you've been curious. The truth is, Miles and I are together, she whispered, her eyes darting around as if to make sure no one was listening. Darren's eyes lit up with triumph. But listen, she added, putting on a convincing sigh, the only reason I even went out with you was to stop the rumors. You know how people talk. I thought if they saw me with someone else, it would die down. But honestly, I shouldn't have dragged you into it. Darren smiled slyly, nodding. Don't worry, Jasmine. I'm glad you told me. Your secret's safe with me. But Jasmine knew exactly where he was heading next. The next morning, Vanessa was brimming with excitement, strutting into the boardroom for the company-wide meeting. Her smile was razor-sharp as she stood in front of everyone, eyeing Jasmine and Miles smugly. I think before we move on, Vanessa began loudly, everyone should know the truth about our CEO and his special assistant, how Jasmine has earned her rise. Jasmine, seated at the table beside Miles, didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly picked up a remote and clicked a button on the projector behind Vanessa. Suddenly, recorded audio of Darren and Vanessa's dinner played out. We both know Jasmine doesn't belong here. Don't worry, Vanessa, I'll help you bring them both down. The room fell silent, jaws dropping as Vanessa spun around, pale as a ghost. Miles stood slowly, fixing Vanessa with a cold stare. "Well, Vanessa," he said quietly but firmly, "I think we've all heard enough." Vanessa's trap had turned on her, and everyone saw the truth at last. The room stayed deathly quiet, the echoes of Vanessa and Darren's incriminating words still hanging in the air. Vanessa, realizing the weight of what had just been exposed, tried to recover, her voice shaky but still laced with desperation. "This isn't what it sounds like," she stammered, glancing around at the shocked faces of the company's top executives. "This is all being twisted." Miles raised a hand, silencing her. His voice was calm but razor-sharp. "Enough, Vanessa." He took a slow step toward her, his eyes locked on hers. "You've been spreading lies about one of the hardest-working employees here, attempting to manipulate my leadership and conspiring to sabotage not only Jasmine, but this entire company for your personal vendetta. You think we don't see that now?" A ripple of murmurs filled the room as others nodded in agreement. Vanessa's face turned red, then pale, her usual confident smirk now gone. "Miles, wait." "No," he said firmly. "There's no coming back from this." Turning to the room, Miles straightened his shoulders. Effective immediately, Vanessa Caldwell is terminated from Harrington Global. I won't tolerate sabotage or personal agendas that undermine the integrity of this company or its people. Security was quietly summoned, and though professional, their presence was clear. "Please gather your things, Vanessa," Miles said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Vanessa's eyes filled with rage and disbelief as she looked at Jasmine, who sat calmly, her head high. "You think you've won?" Vanessa hissed quietly as she passed Jasmine on her way out. Jasmine gave her a cool, steady look. "I didn't have to win, Vanessa. You lost all on your own." As the doors closed behind Vanessa, Miles turned to Jasmine, a soft but proud smile tugging at his lips. "I hope you know you've not only earned your place here, Jasmine, but you've earned everyone's respect." Some of the other executives in the room who had been skeptical before now nodded in agreement. "I do now," Jasmine said, smiling for real this time. As she left the meeting room, heads turned, but not with whispers this time. With respect. Jasmine had weathered the storm and come out stronger, a woman who stood her ground and won with grace. Later that afternoon, Jasmine was called to Miles' office. She straightened her blouse, still adjusting to the whirlwind of the day, and knocked lightly before stepping inside. Miles sat behind his large oak desk, looking more serious than she'd seen him in weeks. "Have a seat, Jasmine," he said quietly, gesturing to the chair across from him. She sat down, her brow slightly furrowed. "Everything okay?" Miles leaned forward, hands clasped together. He took a long breath before speaking. "I've been thinking, Vanessa may have been wrong about many things, but she might have accidentally stumbled on something we should consider." Jasmine blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Miles met her gaze steadily. "It would look good for the company if I were involved with someone as sharp, as brilliant as you. After everything that happened today, the board agrees. They're willing to support us if you're willing to play along." Jasmine's jaw dropped. "You're asking me to fake date you? For the company?" Miles held her gaze, his voice softer now. "Not just for the company, but on a personal level also." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Jasmine's heart thudded in her chest. She had expected a thank you, maybe even a raise. But this? "Miles?" she stammered, searching for words. "This is a lot. I don't know what to say." He smiled gently, sensing her inner turmoil. "I know, I'm not expecting an answer right now. Take your time, Jasmine. Think about it." Still stunned, Jasmine rose from her chair. "I will. I need to think." As she walked out, her mind swirled with questions. Was this real, or just another game? Jasmine sat on her couch, still in her work clothes, staring at her phone. Her mind was spinning from what Miles had said. Finally, she took a deep breath and dialed her best friend Layla, the one person she could trust to give her honest advice. "Girl, it's been a minute." Layla's voice rang with excitement as she answered. "You must have tea if you're calling me this late." Jasmine let out a nervous laugh. "Layla, you have no idea. I need you to listen, okay? And don't judge me until I finish." Layla instantly got serious. All right, what's going on? Talk to me. Jasmine hesitated before blurting it out. Miles. My boss Miles, he called me into his office today and said he wants us to pretend to be together for the company. And then he added that he kind of wants it for himself too. There was a long pause on the other end. Wait, what? Layla nearly shouted. Are you telling me your CEO wants to fake date you? And also really date you? Jasmine, this sounds like a corporate soap opera. I know, Jasmine groaned, flopping back against the couch. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Like, is this even real life? Layla exhaled slowly. Okay, slow down. First of all, how do you feel? I mean, putting the company aside, do you like him? Because that's a dangerous game to play if your heart's not in it. Jasmine went quiet for a moment. I don't know, Layla. I respect him. And yeah, there's something there. But this whole situation, it feels complicated. Like, what if I say yes and it blows up in my face? Layla softened her voice. Girl, listen. You've worked too hard to let anyone, even Miles, play games with your future. You need to figure out what you want, not what's good for the company, not what makes him comfortable. What's right for you. Jasmine nodded, even though Layla couldn't see her. Yeah, you're right. I need to think about what I really want. Thanks, Lay. Always, girl. And if you need me to pull up and slap a CEO, say the word. Jasmine laughed for real this time. I'll keep that in mind. Still, as she hung up, the decision weighed heavily on her heart, but at least now she wasn't facing it alone. The next morning, Jasmine walked into the office with a sense of calm determination. She had spent the night thinking, replaying every word Miles had said, every warning Layla had given her. She knew she needed to speak her truth, clearly and confidently. By noon, she was standing in front of Miles's office, taking a breath before knocking. Come in, his familiar voice called. Jasmine stepped inside. Miles looked up from his desk, surprised but attentive. Jasmine, he said softly, I wasn't expecting to see you so soon. She closed the door behind her and sat down across from him, meeting his gaze directly. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, she began, her voice steady. And I need to be honest with you. Miles leaned forward slightly, watching her carefully. I have worked way too hard to get where I'm at, she said firmly. I fought through being overlooked, underestimated, and having people like Vanessa try to tear me down. I earned my position, and I'm not about to let anyone think I'm here because of some relationship with the CEO. Miles nodded slowly, as if he expected that answer, but waited for her to continue. That being said, Jasmine added, her tone softening just a little, I'm willing to be your +1 at company events. I get that it may help the image of the company, and I'm not against supporting that. But if you're serious about anything more, she paused, her eyes locking onto his, then it has to be real. No games. No pretending. Miles exhaled, something like relief and respect crossing his face. I hear you, he said quietly. And honestly, I didn't want it to be a game either. I just didn't know how to say it without risking what we have, or what you've built. Jasmine gave a small smile, tilting her head. Well, now you know. I'm not here to be anyone's cover story, Miles. If you want me, you want me. Not for the board, not for appearances, but for real. Miles stood slowly, walking around the desk to stand in front of her. Then for what it's worth, Jasmine, I do want you. For real. For a moment, there was only silence between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Jasmine rose from her chair, offering him a small but genuine smile. Good. Then we'll see where this goes. Carefully, but on my terms. Miles smiled back, his eyes warm with admiration. On your terms. As Jasmine left the office, she felt lighter, in control of her destiny, and for the first time in a long while, hopeful about what might come next. The day of the annual Harrington Global Charity Fundraiser arrived quickly. The first official event where Jasmine would appear on Miles' arm as his +1. As she stood in front of her mirror at home, adjusting the soft satin of her sleek emerald green gown, Jasmine took a deep breath. This is for me. I'm walking in there as someone who earned her place. When she arrived at the event, the room was already buzzing, executives, clients, and investors mingling in designer suits and glittering gowns. But the moment Jasmine stepped in, walking beside Miles, the air shifted, conversations slowed. Heads turned. She held her chin high, her natural curls falling elegantly over her shoulders, her makeup flawless but understated. Miles, ever the picture of calm, gently placed a hand at the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd like she belonged there. Because she did. From across the room, Layla, who was covering the event as part of the PR team, caught Jasmine's eye and gave her an approving nod and a sly smile. But not everyone was thrilled. Whispers stirred like ripples through water. Is that her? I thought the rumors weren't true. She looks incredible, but wow, Miles really brought her? Well, she did hold her own against Vanessa. Maybe she earned that spot. Jasmine heard them all, but didn't flinch. As the night went on, Miles introduced her confidently to key investors. This is Jasmine Taylor, Miles said proudly, emphasizing her role. She's been instrumental in turning things around this quarter. Jasmine shook hands gracefully, engaging in conversations about company projects with ease and insight, surprising many who had only seen her as the woman behind the front desk. By mid-evening, even the most skeptical board members were nodding along as she discussed strategies for rebuilding company image post-scandal. Standing near the balcony, Miles leaned closer to her, speaking quietly so only she could hear. You're killing it tonight. Jasmine smiled, sipping her champagne. Told you. I'm not here for show. He grinned. I never doubted that. But across the room, Darren, now clearly an outsider after the Vanessa scandal, watched them with a sour expression. He wasn't part of this inner circle anymore. And Jasmine was. As the night wound down, Miles and Jasmine stood together near the entrance, watching people leave, many offering Jasmine warm smiles and congratulations. Looks like the company's getting used to seeing us together, Miles murmured. Jasmine smiled, feeling in control of her story for the first time. Good, because I'm just getting started. The charity event was winding down, but Jasmine could still feel the buzz in the air. People had finally begun to see her for her true worth, and not just as Miles's date, but as a force inside Harrington Global. As she gathered her clutch and prepared to leave, she felt a presence behind her. So this is how you play the game, huh? Jasmine turned slowly to see Darren, leaning casually against a column, his tie loosened, a bitter smirk on his face. You're really enjoying this, aren't you? He sneered. Walking around like you own the place, like you didn't sleep your way to the top. Jasmine took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. You still don't get it, Darren, she said coolly. I'm here because I earned my place, something you and Vanessa couldn't handle because you thought people like me don't belong at the top. Darren laughed bitterly. Yeah? Keep telling yourself that. You think Miles actually cares? You're just a shiny new distraction for him. He'll move on when he's bored. Jasmine stepped closer, her eyes sharp and unwavering. You know, I actually feel sorry for you, Darren, she said quietly but firmly, because you think everything has to be manipulation and lies to get ahead. But here's the difference between us. I don't have to destroy others to win. I just do the work. And Miles, he sees that. Everyone sees that now. Darren's smirk faltered for a moment, his jaw tightening. Oh, and by the way, Jasmine added with a smile, your little spy games, they're over. You've got no one left to feed your lies to. Vanessa's gone. The board knows everything. And after tonight, so does everyone else. Darren scoffed. You think this is the end? Jasmine gave him a sharp, confident smile. No, this is the beginning. For me. You? You're irrelevant. As she turned to walk away, Miles approached from the side, having caught enough of the conversation to understand. Everything good here? He asked, slipping a hand gently on Jasmine's back, protective but letting her lead. Perfect, Jasmine said, glancing back one last time at Darren, whose expression was now a mix of anger and defeat. Without another word, she walked out of the venue beside Miles, leaving Darren in the past and stepping fully into her future. Later that night, after the event had ended and the city skyline glittered against the dark sky, Miles and Jasmine found themselves in his private penthouse, away from the stares and whispers of the office world. Miles poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Jasmine as they stepped out onto his balcony, the cool night breeze wrapping around them. "To us," he said softly, raising his glass. Jasmine gave him a curious smile as she clinked her glass to his. "To us?" Miles smiled, watching her carefully. "To survival. To making it through tonight. To you for showing everyone exactly who you are." Jasmine chuckled lightly, taking a sip. "It wasn't easy, you saw Darren, but I wasn't about to let him, or anyone, steal what I've worked for." Miles leaned against the railing, studying her in the moonlight. "You know," he started, swirling the wine in his glass, "I've been meaning to say something. Since the first night we attended an event together." Jasmine raised a brow. "Yeah?" Miles nodded, looking a little more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. "The first time I walked into that room with you, I knew people would stare. I knew the whispers would start. But what I didn't expect," he said, turning to face her fully, "was how proud I would feel standing next to you. You carried yourself like you owned the room, even when I knew you were probably nervous. And that night," he paused, searching for the right words. "That night," he continued softly, "I realized it wasn't just your beauty, though believe me, Jasmine, you are breathtaking, but it was your strength, your fire. You have this way of walking into a space and making people rethink everything they thought they knew. And it shook me. You shook me." Jasmine's breath caught for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. "Miles," she whispered, a little stunned at the raw honesty in his voice. He reached out gently, brushing a stray curl from her face. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever known, inside and out. And tonight, when you stood up to Darren, you proved to everyone what I've already known for a while now." Jasmine swallowed, emotions swirling in her chest. "Which is?" "That you are the one I want beside me. Not just at company events, but in life." For a moment, Jasmine said nothing, watching him with searching eyes. Then a soft smile touched her lips. "I guess, if we're being honest, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you either." Miles stepped closer, gently taking her hand. "Then maybe we stop pretending, Jasmine." She squeezed his hand softly, her smile widening. "Yeah, maybe we do." As they stood on the balcony, the city lights glowing around them, Jasmine realized that for the first time, she wasn't standing in anyone's shadow. She was right where she belonged. Miles gently held Jasmine's hand as they stood on the balcony, the hum of the city below them. The weight of the past few weeks, the rumors, Vanessa's schemes, the tension at work, seemed to fade in that quiet moment between them. Jasmine looked up at him, her fingers lightly tracing the rim of her wineglass, her heart pounding. "So," she said softly, her eyes searching his. "What happens now, Miles? You said you wanted this, but I need to know what this is. I need to know you're not just caught up in everything that's happened." Miles set his glass down on the nearby table and stepped closer to her, taking both of her hands gently in his. His voice was low but sincere, like he was speaking from the very center of his heart. "Jasmine, I've never been more certain of anything," he said. "This isn't about the company or the board or shutting down rumors. It's about you. I want to be with you. Really with you. No pretending, no +1 for appearances. I want you in my life." Jasmine felt her chest tighten with emotion, hearing words she had never expected but always secretly longed for. "Miles, I'm not someone you just pull into a relationship for convenience. I've worked hard to build who I am, and if we do this, it's gotta be real. No hiding, no secrets, no making me feel like I'm just a part of some image you need to uphold." He smiled, nodding. "I know, and I don't want to hide it. I want to show everyone that I'm with you because I admire and respect you, because I care about you. Jasmine, I see you, not just for what you've done for the company, but for who you are. Strong, brilliant, and beautiful." Jasmine felt her throat tighten, her eyes growing moist. "You really mean that?" Miles stepped even closer, gently cupping her face. Every word. She let out a small, breathless laugh. "Well, I guess we're not pretending anymore, are we?" His smile was soft, but his eyes were intense with feeling. Not anymore. And before she could say another word, Miles leaned in, brushing his lips against hers. A kiss that was gentle, but filled with unspoken feelings finally set free. When they finally pulled away, Jasmine looked up at him, a real smile blooming on her face. "So, we're really doing this?" she whispered, her hands still resting on his chest. Miles grinned, leaning his forehead against hers. "Yeah, we are. You and me?" She laughed softly, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. "All right, Miles Harrington, let's see where this goes." He kissed her again, deeper this time, as if sealing the promise between them. For the first time, Jasmine wasn't just fighting to hold her place. She was standing strong in her worth, and with someone who saw her completely. And as they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the city lights blinking below them, Jasmine knew this was only the beginning. Not just of a relationship, but of a whole new chapter in her life. The end. Thank you for listening to Green Tea Tale. Help our channel, like, share, comment, and subscribe.